I am joined today by Pranay Joshi. Pranay has had a unique career journey. He went from software engineering to marketing, back to software engineering. In January of this year, Pranay launched Skip Round. From custom resumes and cover letters to an AI coach to help with interview prep, Skip Round is a fully loaded toolkit to help job seekers get and nail their interview. If Pranay could envision a utopian world, it would be one where everyone loves their job. He believes Skip Round is the first tangible step towards that vision. Pranay, thank you so much for being in my orbit and for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you today about what's broken about the job search process. Before we dive into that, I would love for you to tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get to forming Skip Round? What was the gap you saw in the marketplace? So walk me through a little of the journey.
Yeah, so I think the journey really starts with like I had a bunch of conversations with people about how AI is about to disrupt a lot of things. And I think we've been fortunate enough that for the longest time, at least in my lifetime, nothing has happened that drastic that we're about to go through with AI. And so it was already back of my mind. And then you see all these layoffs happening in other companies, but it really hit home when almost like all of my team was about to be laid off. And so I decided to quit as well, and just helping everyone that was being affected by layoffs. And as I started doing this over and over again, I realized I think there is a product here. And as someone who just loves building products, I just started building something to help the people I knew. And it quickly turned into um, 5 people already using it, then 10 people. And so I was like, well, I'm just giving it away. Might as well start talking to other people who might be interested just in my thoughts. So I started posting on LinkedIn as well. So right now, it's been about 3 months. I've been kind of active on LinkedIn. Before that, you might see like, one or two congrats comments on other people's posts. But I'm really enjoying that part as well. So it's a combination of just sharing my knowledge, past experience of my career, and just helping people who are affected by layoffs to do AI.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I know, especially when it hits home, how the founder's journey is difficult enough as it is, but having a really compelling why to do this every single day is a beacon of hope to guide you through this. So, what do you say? I guess, what would you say is the maybe there's more than one here, but the reason why the job search process is so broken? Would you say it's because of a failing, for lack of a better word, on the part of the companies who are hiring? Is it the lack of good tools, applicant tracking tools that we have on the market? Or is it unfortunately a failing on the part of the job seeker to approach the job search process the right way? Or is it D, all of the
Mhm.
above?
Yeah, I'd go with the. It is definitely all of the above, and I won't even call it broken. It's just it's built in a way uh, that I feel like has a lot of room for improvement. And the room for improvement is again not a blanket. Here's one thing everyone should do, and then everything will be good. The reason why it appears to be broken for almost everyone is because we don't approach it the way we are as a job seeker. You assume people want someone else. People want that person who knows everything. People want someone who has all the experience. But in reality, no one wants that. Like people want people who can learn, who can adapt. Business changes all the time, and being someone who is hired, I was almost never looking for someone who was an absolute expert in their field. I was looking for someone who would join the team, bring what they know, but be like really open to adapting to something new. So if today I'm hiring you as a React developer and tomorrow Vue.js is the way to go and everyone believes like that's where we should be heading, you don't dig your heels and go, no, I'm not gonna like learn Vue.js. Like that's not the person I'm looking for. So I was looking for adaptability, and interview process is really not built to showcase adaptability. Most often we're told go to an interview and talk about everything you know rather than everything you're just learning. Or so a lot of my interview questions were around what have you learned lately, what is something that you've taught yourself, what is something you've taught others, how many lunch and learns you've done, and these were mostly like soft human skills. The thing I would say from the hiring side, that would appear to be broken is um, the artifact that we call a resume. And it's, and I would say the whole process, but let's start with the resume. Resume is like a 1 or 2 page document that's supposed to represent a whole human being. And of course, everyone knows it doesn't work. Everyone knows there's no way I can figure out who this person is from what they've written on a piece of paper. But then, like, because it's so prolific, we try to shove in as much as we can so that someone can really get a sense of who we are. Whereas the purpose of a resume is very simple. It's for you to intrigue someone enough that they get on a call with you. And so if you look at it that way, then you go, okay, yeah, that I can fit on a page, because it's almost like you met someone on an elevator, and you go, what can I share with you in like the 5 second elevator ride, where you go, oh, you know what, let's chat after, like tomorrow I'm free at 5, let's grab a coffee. And that's the purpose of the resume. So um, job seekers try to fit too much in, which as a hiring manager, I always felt you put too many things here. I'm looking for a iOS engineer who has done Swift UI. That was clearly mentioned on the job description. Why am I seeing like your Java experience? Why am I seeing your experience with like .NET and all that other stuff? Like, just tell me how much you've done with the things that I'm looking for, and I'll definitely jump on a call with you. And then we'll figure it out how things go. And so if you are trying to appeal to a hiring manager who's even remotely like myself, um, just make your resume a short snippet of an ad that they can get you on a call. And, that would sort of fix it, at least for people like me.
Yeah. And I think this is why I've been fortunate to have a role in this, is that resumes only say so much. I mean, even if you do put your tech chops and how long you've worked with Swift, it doesn't capture the essence of who you are as a
Right.
person. And so that can be really challenging to tell that story. Going to the interview as part of this process, I had a guest on recently, Katie McIntyre from Career Sprout. She had a
Yeah, I
really
saw that.
excellent,
It was an amazing, yeah,
it was
podcast.
great. But she had an excellent point among many, that you don't show up to game day and expect to knock it out of the park having never practiced. And
Right.
people treat interviews very differently. They think they should just be able to show up and do it. And that's why I was really excited about what you were building with Skip Round, specific to this AI coach that allows you to do some interview practice to get those reps in. Can you walk me through a little bit more about that capability, what that looks like?
I'm pretty sure with AI I'll be able to do a lot more. But today the way it's built is, first off, based on the job description, everything starts with an application in Skip Round. So you start your application with telling us about the job description. Once you do that, we can feed that to the AI, and it gives you a few interesting questions that might be asked in the interview. And the purpose is definitely not, here's the key, here are the 7 questions they're going to ask, and like you just prepare that and you're golden. The key is to think from the perspective of the hiring manager. If they mention something like React in their job description, chances are they're going to ask you something around that. And the questions that we propose on the interview prep section are meant to be like a mix of behavioral, situational, technical questions. So oftentimes we're good on the technical side, but what we forget is people remember stories way more than they remember technical facts. And so if I asked you, tell me about your experience on React, and you said, oh, I've worked 5 years. 5 seconds later, I'm going to forget the 5 years. What I'm going to remember if you said, oh, that's funny. You know how I got to learn about React? It was this guy I met, and he was incredibly into Vue.js. And then suddenly, like one day I see him like totally into React and telling me all the things that are great about it. And that led me to this path that I spent 3 months just watching everything that I could on React, and now I can't get away from it. And that's a story I'm going to remember. So what we try to do is you write down your answer. AI sort of helps with just grammatical errors and stuff. And then you get on the camera. The camera feed doesn't go anywhere. It's just for you. You record yourself, you watch yourself. You record yourself, you watch yourself. And for sure, in the future, maybe we can partner with career coaches who can actually give you some feedback from a human to human. But just that thing about, we used to say like stand up in front of a mirror and say something. I just want to replicate that here. And given that you have a video recording, it gives you a little bit more time to look at yourself and think about how you said it, what you said. It also helps you bring your stories down to less than a minute, which is generally the ideal time. You don't want to dwell too much on a story, but you do want to have a little story there. So the more you practice, you go, oh, I went on a tangent there, or like I was just blabbering. Let me bring it down, get it tighter. And then that's something that I think that feature would help as well.
I could have used that help when I was learning how to do this podcast because I'll tell you, the first few episodes, I was a windbag. I didn't know how to be concise in my questioning, and I got so excited about what I was, hearing from my guests, and it took me a while to learn that. And again, it's just like a muscle you need to exercise. One of the things you and I talked about the first time we talked, and I was just so intrigued by, is you mentioned how much you take into consideration the human psychology behind the job search process when you were designing Skip Round. Can you share more about that? Because there's, as we've talked before, there's such a lack of feedback loop when you send your resume off into the void, and people
Mm-hmm.
grow discouraged when they do that 150 times. Can you walk through the psychology that you were referencing when we talked and how you designed Skip Round to take that into consideration?
Yeah, so I'll preface that with I'm a huge believer in psychology philosophy, and so even though I work primarily on engineering and technical side, I consume as much content as I can on those topics. And so from all that I've like read and listened to, um, there is something to goal setting that pushes us forward, and even if we have the wrong goal, the absolute like stupid as weird as goal that no one cares about, we're still much better off than someone who doesn't have a goal. So the an analogy that I heard a long time ago, and I think this was from a book called Lead the Field by Earl Nightingale, and he mentioned like a man without a goal is like a ship that has no destination predetermined. And so when was the last time you got on a ship or a car or a boat or a plane where you didn't know where the plane was going? And chances are there'll be turbulence. Chances are like you'll sway. There'll be like winds that get you in a different direction. But at the very least, you'll continue to move towards that goal. And no one is telling you can't change that goal. No one is telling your ship is predetermined and it has to get to that location. You can always change your goal, but having that goal gives you one direction to walk towards. So that's where we start with Skip Round. The very first thing that happens is you answer a few questions to determine after your resume what is an ideal job or an ideal job description that you would like to have in your future. And once you see that, you set that as your goal. And and that itself, I think, would be like a huge plus if everyone who's job seeking prints out one job title that they're really crazy about, print it on a piece of paper, stick it on a wall, that you're like above 90% of the entire world who's looking for a job right now. So in Skip Round, we have so I have this framework that I used to preach long before. I call it the NAIL framework, which is networking, apply, introspection, and learning. But the order is different. The order, you start with introspection, then you go into learning based on what you learn about yourself in introspection. Then you do some networking where you share your learning. So you're being selfless, you're giving to people. And then finally, when you hear of the job opportunities or you find job opportunities, then you apply. Whereas most people start the other way around, like exact opposite. So given that those four tenets are important for job search, we have these four weekly goals that you set, and you say, I'm going to do 5 activities that pertain to networking, 5 for introspection, 5 for learning, and 5 jobs that I'm going to apply to. And you set that goal, and then you track your activity from day to day. So if today you don't feel like talking to anyone, do some introspection. If tomorrow you feel like I'm so energetic, I want to talk to a few people, that's your networking day. Then give one day to just like looking for the jobs and then applying to a few jobs. But of course, you're applying to the jobs that are really aligned with your ideal job title. And then whatever time else you get, upskill, learn, watch something that you consider. And I don't recommend only reading and studying hard skills, the skills that are important to your job. Human skills are just as important. So spend some time on that interview prep, even if it's like a tell me about yourself question. Um, Watch something that's about psychology. Watch something that's about, some of your hobbies. So spread your learning across both your hobbies, human skills, on top of whatever the hard skills are in your job.
I love the nail framework. When we talked about that last time, I was so struck by how it is this holistic view of looking for your next job, your next, point on your destination. I think, and I mentioned this to you last time, I think people struggle fundamentally, introspection being the building block of all this, to ask themselves, what do I want? I mean, sometimes the only time we ask ourselves that is when we're at a restaurant and you're having to make a decision about what to eat. And that's the first time you've asked yourself, what do I want? And that's just about food, let alone about a job. So I think that's so
Right.
beautiful how you bake that into the model. Do you see there being any challenge with people getting fixated on the dopamine rush they get from the process of,
Mhm.
learning, meeting with people, and don't want to go through the big hard step of getting that next job because this plane of accomplishment feels so good? I'm just curious if that's been something you've thought of or witnessed.
Yeah, I think that's where the original goal that you set is really important, and that's like front and center at the top of the dashboard at Skip Round, where your primary goal, and just to remind you every time you land on that page, is my goal is to land a job as a whatever it is that you said. And so when you do networking, every time you go to log something, it'll remind you, hey, remember, like, this is your goal. And so I'm hoping that helps. But also, one of the things that I want to build in the future into the product is giving you prompts for introspection, where we don't just leave it to you to figure out what to introspect on every day. Given that we know your resume, given that AI can really help you think in certain areas, I'm thinking like we'll create some prompts for you to think about, and part of that would be reflecting on the process as you go about it. So it might be like, oh, you logged a networking call yesterday. Now spend like 5 minutes today reflecting on how that went. How did that relate to your goal? Because like the next thing I feel for the product would be introspection and helping people like stay engaged. And introspection is a great way because it doesn't depend on anyone else. It's one of those things that you can do on your own. I have a theory why most people don't do it, and that's because most people don't like to sit and think. It's extremely painful, even though we don't associate that with pain as we like realize what pain is. But it is extremely like last time someone told you, I think I was a kid, like shut up and sit. And when someone says that, and maybe that's why we're like, we don't shut up and sit, because the only time someone told was the teacher who was mad at us. But if you sat down and just think about things, initially it'll be hard because you're like, what am I doing? Like, I could be on Instagram right now. But you sit down and you start thinking about stuff. That's why like writing is good, because at least you're doing something. You're not just sitting and thinking. Same thing with like to-do lists. The fact that you sit down and you write what are the things that you want to do in a day, that is a huge step towards you at least spending some time in a day with your own thoughts. Over time, you start to reap the benefits in areas that you didn't think it was gonna help you. I've personally seen myself. I was super scared of writing anything on LinkedIn. What that has become for me is now my thinking time. And so I don't associate LinkedIn with how many likes I got. I associate it with, did I spend 3 distinct times in the week where I thought about how I can help job seekers? And some of it spills into the product that will be built. Some of it helps actually a human being. But some of it is like, now I think so much clearly about this topic. And next time I have a conversation with anyone, I can speak a little more intelligently, a little more with conviction, because I sat down and thought about it for 15 minutes. So I would really recommend people get into this habit of thinking. And if you do, then and you have that goal front and center, then everything just falls in line.
I agree. I think that's so great you found an outlet in LinkedIn. I know sometimes people are critical of it, and I did have a question actually about LinkedIn for you, but before I go there, I guess it's I would say to add to why people maybe don't sit and shut up and think outside of maybe this inner rebellion that we're not going to give that teacher the final word here, but I would also say I think a lot of us are afraid to find out what we do want. I know that was the case for me for many years. I was afraid to hear what the answer was. And what's amazing is once you do know, you can start making steps towards that, or you can decide not to. We have so much power and choice, but
Mhm.
a lot of times I think we're afraid to find out what we really want. And with that in mind, do you think we all need a career, or can it just be a job? Like, and what I mean by the distinction of that is that career is often talked about this grandiose sense of purpose. This is a big life
Mhm.
trajectory. And a job is just a job. It pays the bills, it could be anything from shoveling horse shit to writing code, whatever it is, it's a job. But
Mhm.
do you think we all need a career with that heavy weighted sense of purpose, or can we just have a job?
Yeah, so I think like you're right. There's a distinction between the two. What you wrapped inside that word career was purpose. And so to take it a step further, I think everyone should have a purpose. And then whether it's a career or a job, like both of those kind of like serve to that purpose. And at least in my life, it's always been I just want to help people. And whether I wrote code, which is something I was good at, and I truly enjoy writing code. Like, if any day someone said, "What would be the one activity you want to do?" And I could pick and choose, and I didn't have to care about anything else, I would be like, "Oh, I'll just write some code." And so there are things that I enjoy, and I think that's the framework of like ikigai, right? Like you find things that you're good at, find things that can help people, find things that give you purpose, and like kind of find that intersection. And so I think, to your point, if you can find your purpose, that would be incredible. And I think that's what people should look for. Um, and then hopefully that threads along a string of jobs that builds a career that's in serving of that purpose. For me, I would say um, my purpose of helping people started with the very first time I worked for a banking, like it was a banking software company, and I wanted to provide some creative solutions to some of the things that we were building into the product. And what I realized was, at that time, as an engineer in India, you didn't have any say into the creative direction or generally the direction of the product. Everything was handed down to you. And I decided to give up engineering right then, because I didn't find my purpose wasn't to just write code without actually like really serving the people that are going to use the software. So I realized it wasn't just writing code, it was creating something that people use. And so I left that. I went into marketing and advertising because I thought, hey, I want to be creative. I learned a ton about business, but I started building more and more products on the side. And that made me bring back to software engineering. But not once throughout that journey, I felt, why did I switch jobs? I went from marketing to consulting to writing code to leading teams, and that happened like one after the other, and it just felt so natural because every time I felt I wasn't meeting or doing something that was purposeful, that was meaningful, it was a very easy decision for me to move to the next thing. And I hope that everyone finds that. And I think it comes from that introspection, thinking about it every day. Introspection is like all these activities that we're talking about is not one and done. It's something that you do almost regularly, if not every day. And the reason you do that is because you're human, you get new information every day, and you can change, you have the permission to change your mind. The only time I would say, hold back on changing your mind is when you're being too quick about it and you don't give the idea or the purpose enough time to reflect in your job. And a story that comes to mind is it's called Acres of Diamond, which is about this farmer or someone in Africa. He heard that other farmers or other people are finding these gems and creating like diamond mines. And so he immediately sells his land, goes out in search of these mines, spends like years and years, and realizes that he spent all his money, all his time, and goes broke. Now, back on his original farm, or the piece of land that was, the person who bought it was walking on a ravine and suddenly saw this like big rock. So it was an interesting rock. He brings it home, puts it on his mantle, and one time a friend of his comes and says, like, almost falls off his chair and goes like, "Do you know what this is?" He's like, "No, it's just an interesting piece of rock I found." And he's like, "This is probably the biggest diamond in Africa that's ever been found." And so that guy who had that piece of land gave up what was literally acres of diamonds in search for something else. So I always remind myself, even though I'm adaptable, I can change my mind. If I have that constant purpose, or at least a purpose that I can strive towards and have slightly longer time, or give it a longer time, I might find my acres of diamond. And once I've totally explored my land, I'm open to move on, but do that exploration first.
Wow. That's a really profound image. And like you said about interviewing, this is the type of storytelling that I know I'll never forget that story. I do think we tend to also get excited about something, and fear is often right at the backside of that. And so I would
Mhm.
also encourage people, if they do discover their purpose, fear is often baked into that discovery, and to stick with it long enough to get past that. The fear may never go away, but the crippling sense of it might, and then you can see more clearly. So,
Right.
two more questions for you. I mentioned I had one about LinkedIn specifically, and that was because LinkedIn has become so synonymous with the job search process. Because, especially, I work mostly with software engineers, and that's a great platform for people to post roles, to meet each other. And I want to know, what would you say are the downsides? I have a couple of thoughts about the downsides of using LinkedIn exclusively in a lot of ways for jobs, given the easy apply and the availability of them. But what would
Mhm.
you say are some of your observations about the downsides of using LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I agree with you on the easy apply. Like it's a terrible idea. But I see why it exists, and I see what that has triggered is even worse situation now, where job seekers are exposed to these tools that will auto apply for you. And that's just, and because I've been on the hiring side, so I know, even when I got like 50 resumes and most of them were like not aligned to what I was looking for, I was like really frustrated. And I can only imagine what people are seeing now with like hundreds and thousands of resumes, where people are either clicking that easy apply, or they're using these automated tools that tweak your resume and just sends it blindly. If more and more people use these tools, that forces the companies to use tools like ATSs, where um, and like a short sidebar on ATS, there's such a huge misconception on what an ATS can do. People assume that the software is capable of way more than it is. And so they are terrible at screening. So I never agreed with any auto screening that an ATS came with. I always looked through them manually. And I know a ton of hiring managers who do the same. But now with this easy apply, with more and more auto apply, it'll force these hiring managers to go, I have no choice but to use AI tools to screen these resumes. So we're just making the problem worse. On the other hand, like there are things on LinkedIn that, again, like it's a social media. So it's more and more it's being built to keep you on the platform and engaged. And so my trick, and I'm on all social media, I've never blocked or deleted any social media app ever. But I feel like everyone who talks to me, they're like, you're like so productive. And so I've always wondered, like, how do I strike that balance where I can be on social media and also be productive? And I do it in two ways. One, I have this inner monologue that always goes, what am I doing? Is this the best use of my time? Anytime I'm on a social media platform. So that's just self-discipline. It just, you train yourself. Even like after 15, 20 seconds, you go, do I have anything else that I could do slightly better? Is this my rest time? And if that's your rest time, great. Like I don't feel guilty. I set aside this time for me to like just rest. So, and this is how I'm getting my rest today. The other way I deal with it is I train the AIs on these platforms to provide me with content that I like. So whether it's Facebook, Instagram, I think LinkedIn is slightly better than others, but anytime you see something that you don't want to see again, I can guarantee you there is a button somewhere that you can tell the platform, I hate this content, don't show it to me ever again. So take that 5 extra seconds to tell the AI what you don't like, but use the platform um, to the extreme where you control it rather than it controlling you. And that's just something that I've learned to do. I definitely recommend everyone post on LinkedIn. Uh, and that's not because you want to overshare or not because you want to get some likes or there's like that dopamine hit you get, but simply because everyone has areas of knowledge that the world wants to know and needs to know. The only reason why most people don't share is because they assume, because I know it and I'm not so smart, what's the point of me sharing? Like everyone probably already knows it. I was the last person to know like 5 other things that other people shared with me. But the moment you start sharing, you'll realize, I just had a conversation with an iOS developer recently, and I'm like, you're so knowledgeable. Why don't you post anything? And he's looking for a job. And he's like, well, because most stuff that I watch, of course, every other iOS developer has also watched it. And I'm like, hey, I'm an iOS developer. Let's talk about something recently that you watched and you shared with me. And I'm like, see, I didn't know that. I wish you posted that on LinkedIn. You'll get at least one like and maybe a conversation with me. And so then it goes from me to one more person. I shared with him my statistic, which is I started posting on LinkedIn, I want to say 3 months ago. I'm not super consistent, but I'm trying to do like a few posts every week. And now I've gained, I want to say 300 to 400 more people that at least look at my posts. Maybe they don't read it. Those are 300. I don't remember a single time in my life I said something that was heard by 300 people ever. And so it's like 300 more people are at least looking at what I have to say. And that's like a huge privilege that LinkedIn brings to you. So use it for what it is. And I think like most people would be pleasantly surprised when it works for them.
Yeah, well, I agree. And thanks to LinkedIn, that's how you and I met. So I love
Yeah,
how you
exactly.
write. I love what you've built with Skip Round. And if it hadn't been for you being publicly visible on that platform, we wouldn't be talking today. So I think it
True.
is super magical. My last question for you today. We're halfway through 2024. What is top of mind for you personally with Skip Round, but what for the latter half of this year is top of mind for you?
Yeah, so being like a solo founder is hard, and since I started on like this is my very first time, and I would hear from people that it's hard, but you never know unless you walk in their shoes. So I'm realizing that it's hard work. My wife keeps telling me like I've never seen you work this hard ever, and I'm someone who codes all the time. Even when I was like leading teams, I was like constantly learning something and writing code. So for her to say that, I know like I'm like overexerting myself. And so I'm hoping in the next few months, I can at least take some time to slow down a little and then spend maybe more time with family. Like we haven't been out anywhere. Like this weekend is the first time we'll go out for like a 1 day camping thing. But yeah, like I want to slow down a little bit in the second half of the year. And then the other thing as well is like the more I'm like exposing myself on LinkedIn as I'm like meeting incredible people like you, I feel like that's given me actually more support that I ever had as a leader. Because when you're a leader, people look up to you and go like, "Hey, you tell us what we're supposed to do," versus like now I can ask for help. For the longest time, my title or my tagline on LinkedIn was first time founder looking for help. And it was incredible. Like so many people reached out to me that I didn't even know. They were like, and most people would go, oh, they were like trying to sell you something. But not a single person said, here's a service I'm trying to sell you. They said, how can I help you? And they spend hours with me. So I think this whole solo founder thing is just a myth. I think everyone who is a founder has this like the support structure around them that helps them move forward. And I'm like so lucky that I found people like you, people like James, people like Luki, who are like, all of them are like helping me be a good founder and help all these job seekers. So super fortunate, but definitely planning to kind of slow down a little towards the second half.
Yeah. Well, that's beautifully said. I think that we buy into the myth that we need to go through life alone, but we don't come into this world alone, and we hope we don't go out of it alone. And the journey is not meant to be on an island. So I think it's really beautiful what you said. When you show up this way, people want to respond, they want to be generous. People are generous. So I'm really glad that's been your experience. And like I said, I'm so grateful we met, and I want to support you in your journey however I can. And today is an example of how I'm hoping this will reach more people and they can take advantage of what you've built, and you'll get one step closer to having everybody love the job that they want to have.
Absolutely. So if we can end with one question that I have for you, is
I
that
would love
okay?
that. Of course.
So I've loved your intros, and the phrase that I'm like really obsessed about right now is when you say, "Thank you for being in my orbit," and it's something that I've never heard before. And so I just want you to tell me, um, what does that mean to you? It's a beautiful phrase, so I'm just curious to know from you.
Yeah. Well, I think that thank you for asking me a question. That's a like I said to you, this is a different experience for me. I'm always the one asking the questions, but when we all went remote, largely a lot of us went remote in 2020, as I brought up before just a minute ago about human connection, we don't have to feel so fragmented. In fact, I think we are meant to feel interconnected. And I may never be in your atmosphere. I may actually never be in the same room with you, but I feel super connected to you. And I feel like we're on this journey together. And that's where I've been so grateful that since launching this company myself and even going remote and realizing that I'm not alone and I have people that I can call upon. So that's when I think of orbit, it means you're always kind of there. I can always reach out to you. And that's how I feel I've been so fortunate in building this company and going through life to date, is that I have so many wonderful human beings in my orbit. So I hope that answers your question. It means to me there's something very significant that whether we're in the same state or same country, or and we're not, in fact, right, you're in Canada if I'm correct, so we're not even in the same country, and yet I feel like I'm right there with you.
Right. And yeah, the thing that struck me, and just I'm really into astronomy, and so I'm like, this deeper thing about like gravity is like this like unseen force that's we're both like tugging on each other. And like it's not just you and I, like now we have the combined gravitational force that we have on others, and so like just like it's a really beautiful image of being in someone's orbit or someone being in your orbit. So like really applaud you on that phrase.
Oh, well,
Thank you.
thank you. And I think the magic of this podcast has been that people have met, and you're right about this sort of energy, is that I think we're doing some really great work here, and people, you may, and I hope people reach out to you to get to know you, and then now the world became a little bit smaller. And that's been my mission. So, your mission is to help people. I similarly have the same mission. I would add to that is I would love to make the world feel so much smaller and so much sweeter. And if I can do that by being the conduit between two people, be it a hiring manager and a candidate, or people who are watching this podcast one day and go, I want to meet that guy. That guy
Right.
sounds awesome, right? And that's happened. I hear it repeatedly every week. Oh, Lauren, thank you for putting this person in front of me. I
Yeah.
reached out to them on LinkedIn, and now we're connected. And I'm like, that's my greatest gift in this life, is being able to bring people together.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a wonderful conversation. Like I said, I think you've built something truly incredible with Skip Round. I'm so excited to be a witness to that journey, a supporter of that, and encourage people to take advantage of it, because I think we need all the help we can get when we're going towards our new North Star and establishing what that North Star is. So, thank you so much for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Thanks, Lauren. Cheers.